The Broken Carrier, Pearl Harbor Dry Dock, May 28, 1942. May 28, 1942. Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard, Oahu, Hawaii. The humid morning air clings to every surface. The stench of burned oil and saltwater drifts over the docks. Beneath the rising sun, a massive steel hulk looms in dry dock number 1. The USS Yorktown, CV-5, her hull ripped, her flight deck warped, her engine silent. Just days earlier, she had limped home from the Battle of the Coral Sea, battered, smoking, and bleeding from a dozen wounds. Most of the fleet believed she was finished. The Navy's engineers disagreed. Commander Clarence Terry Tibbett, chief of the repair division, squints up at the carrier's side, his hard hat tilted back. 3 months, he mutters, half to himself. That's what she needs. But a young lieutenant rushes toward him, waving a coded message. Sir, orders from SINCPAC, Commander-in-Chief, Pacific Fleet. Tibbett snatches the paper, unfolds it, and reads the words that would make naval history. Yorktown to be made battle-ready. Estimated time to completion, 72 hours. He stares at the message. 3 months of work in 3 days. A whistle shrieks. Men pour across the dock like ants swarming a carcass. 1,400 engineers, welders, electricians, riggers, and machinists. The sound of hammers and torches erupts almost instantly. The Yorktown's resurrection has begun. Inside the dry dock, the ship's wounds are everywhere. One 1,000-pound bomb had smashed through her flight deck during Coral Sea, exploding deep in the compartments below. Deck plates are peeled back like tinfoil. Bulkheads gape open, their steel frames twisted. Oil seeps into the stagnant water around her keel. Climbs a ladder into the hangar deck. The air inside is suffocating. Diesel fumes, scorched paint, and sweat. All right, he shouts over the noise. Priority 1, the flight deck. Get those holes patched so we can land planes again. Below deck, Chief Engineer Lieutenant Commander John McGuire runs his hand over a cracked steam line. We've got ruptures in boiler room 2, sir. Engines 3 and 4 are out. Power grids unstable. Tibbett doesn't flinch. Then we fix it. I don't care how. They have 72 hours. That's 72 hours to rewire burned circuits, replace ruptured pipes, rebuild catapults, patch hull plates, and get a 25,000-ton warship ready for combat. Across the yard, cranes begin to lift giant sheets of steel, lowering them onto the carrier's wounded deck. Sparks rain down as welders in heavy aprons stitch the metal together. The sound echoes like thunder. Night falls over Pearl Harbor, but the lights never go out. Portable flood lamps blaze across the dockyard. Men work in 12-hour shifts, fueled by coffee, adrenaline, and the quiet knowledge that somewhere out there, beyond the horizon, the Japanese Navy is moving. In the distance, the outline of the Enterprise can be seen, undamaged and waiting. The Yorktown's crew, some wounded, many exhausted, drift back from shore leave, drawn by word that their ship isn't dead after all. They stare in disbelief as they see her, scarred, yes, but alive. Goddamn, one sailor whispers. They're actually doing it. By midnight, the deck patches are sealed. Pumps are running. Welders continue their work along the hull, sparks reflecting off the oily water. A foreman checks his watch. 14 hours down, 58 to go. Tibbett leans against the catwalk railing, wiping sweat from his brow. If we pull this off, he murmurs, the Yorktown's going to rise from the dead. He doesn't know it yet, but in just over 3 days, she'll steam out of Pearl Harbor to face the greatest carrier duel in history at Midway. The 72-hour miracle, race against time in Pearl Harbor. May 29th, 1942. Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard, 0430 hours. Floodlights blaze through the pre-dawn haze, painting the Yorktown in harsh white light. Steam hisses from temporary repair lines, mingling with the metallic clang of hammers and the rhythmic pounding of rivet guns. The shipyard is alive, a living, breathing organism of men and machines, all driven by the impossible deadline that looms less than 2 days away. Commander Tibbett hasn't slept. His eyes are bloodshot, his voice hoarse from shouting orders. Shift rotation in 30. Nobody stops until I say so. The Navy's Bureau of Ships has sent every available engineer to Oahu. From Honolulu to the West Coast, emergency supply flights have been dispatched, ferrying pumps, cables, welding rods, and replacement turbines. But some components, like the massive boiler tubes, don't exist in any warehouse. They have to be fabricated from scratch. In Machine Shop Number 5, Lieutenant McGuire oversees a group of men cutting new feedwater pipes from raw steel. Sparks fly as the metal shrieks under the lathe. A young machinist, grease-streaked and trembling from fatigue, calls out, "Sir, we're 2 inches short on the 8-inch coupling." McGuire doesn't blink. "Then use what we've got. Cut the flange, double the gasket, and pray it holds." Up on the flight deck, the air shimmers with heat. Men in sleeveless undershirts haul steel plates across the surface, laying them over bomb craters the size of truck beds. The noise is deafening. A dozen welders crouch low, their torches spitting blue flame as they fuse the deck back together. A foreman yells, "We'll never get it smooth enough for aircraft." "Doesn't need to be smooth," another shouts back. "It just needs to hold." By mid-morning, the entire dry dock reeks of ozone and burnt insulation. Electrical teams work their way through the ship's belly, rerouting power conduits that have been fused shut by fire. The Yorktown's radar arrays are down, her radio room flooded with oil. But one by one, the systems flicker back to life. In the galley, cooks have turned their kitchen into a makeshift tool depot, serving coffee in oil cans. Exhausted men slump against bulkheads for minutes at a time, eyes closing mid-sip before snapping awake to the next command. At noon, Admiral Chester Nimitz himself arrives. His khaki uniform is immaculate, but his face is drawn with concern. He steps onto the dock and gazes up at the wounded ship. The heat from welding torches dances across the air. Commander Tibbet salutes. "Sir." She's holding together. Nimitz scans the hull, then looks Tibbet dead in the eye. She has to. Midway won't wait. The weight of those words spreads through the crew like electricity. Midway, a tiny atoll in the Pacific, is where intelligence reports say Japan will strike next. The Navy needs every carrier it can get. Without the Yorktown, the odds would be 3-2 in Japan's favor. As the afternoon sun sets behind the mountains, workers lower the last steel plate onto the port side. Deep within the ship, pumps roar to life, draining the dry dock. Water cascades away, revealing a patchwork hull, ugly but watertight. The welders cheer. For the first time in days, there's a flicker of belief they might actually make it. At 1900 hours, the Navy band on the nearby pier strikes up, anchors away. Nobody planned it, but it spreads like wildfire, mechanics humming along, sailors tapping their boots against the steel deck. The Yorktown, still scarred, seems to vibrate with the sound. Commander Tibbet walks the length of the deck, passing work crews sprawled in exhaustion. The shipyard lights glint off the fresh steel patches like scars on an old fighter's face. He mutters, almost reverently, "She's coming back." Down below, engineers restart the boilers. One by one, gauges flick upward. Steam pressure builds. The air fills with a low, steady hum. The heartbeat of a ship returning to life. "Boiler 3 holding steady at 300 psi," someone shouts. McGuire slaps a hand against the hot pipe, grinning. She's breathing again. Outside, the dockyard's massive gates creak open, seawater rushing in. The Yorktown begins to float, slowly, majestically. It's been 59 hours since the first order was given. The impossible is nearly complete, but there's still one test left, whether she can move under her own power. Grabs the intercom handset. Engine room, ahead 1/3. A deep vibration rolls through the hull. Then, with a groan that sounds almost like a sigh, the USS Yorktown inches forward, her propellers turning. She lives. The men on the dock erupt in cheers. Some throw their helmets in the air, others just collapse in silence. After 72 relentless hours, The ship that should have been at the bottom of the Pacific is ready for battle once more. Admiral Nimitz watches her glide forward and says quietly, "The spirit of the fleet." The Yorktown's crew begins to reboard, their sea bags slung over their shoulders, climbing the gangway into the patched and battered ship. 3 days ago, she was a wreck. Now, she is reborn. And in less than 48 hours, she'll face the might of the Imperial Japanese Navy at Midway. June 1st, 1942. Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. The morning sun glints off the Pacific as the USS Yorktown cuts through the harbor, her patched hull gleaming like stitched armor. The air is thick with diesel fumes and salt spray. On her flight deck, sailors line the rails in silence, some clutching mugs of coffee, others just staring at the water, trying to comprehend what they've just lived through. Commander Tibbett stands beside Lieutenant Commander McGuire near the island structure. The carrier's engines thrum beneath their boots, steady and strong. "She's not pretty," McGuire says, running a hand along a hastily welded bulkhead. Tibbett smirks. "Pretty doesn't win wars." The Yorktown's whistle shrieks across the harbor as tugs release their lines. From a dock, hundreds of shipyard workers wave their caps, their faces streaked with grease and exhaustion. For 3 sleepless days, they'd poured their souls into bringing her back. And now, watching her sail, many of them can't hold back tears. Down below decks, machinist mates check pressure gauges, oil levels, and turbine speeds. The smell of hot metal fills the air. Every few minutes, an engineer calls out a reading. Boiler pressure steady at 425. Shaft speed good. Captain Elliot Buckmaster, commanding officer of the Yorktown, walks the bridge in silence. He knows his ship's repairs are temporary. The patches will hold, maybe, but one solid hit could tear her apart. Still, orders are orders. A message arrives from Admiral Nimitz. Yorktown and Task Force 17 to proceed at once to Point Luck. Rendezvous with Enterprise and Hornet. Folds the paper and nods. Helm, set course 325. Flank speed. The carrier's engines roar to life, churning white water behind her. Above, her air group, the flyers of Fighting Squadron 3, prepare their aircraft. F-4F Wildcats, SBD Dauntless dive bombers, and TBD Devastator torpedo planes fill the deck. Mechanics swarm over them, checking ammo feeds, reloading bombs, and topping off fuel tanks. In the hangar bay, the smell of aviation fuel mixes with sweat and hydraulic oil. Chief Petty Officer Charles York, one of the veteran deck crew, wipes his brow and mutters, "We're holding her together with prayers and duct tape." "Prayers are Navy issue, Chief," someone shouts back. By dusk, the Hawaiian coastline fades behind them. The ocean stretches endless and dark. On the horizon, the faint silhouettes of the Enterprise and Hornet appear. The rest of Task Force 17, their decks bristling with aircraft and anti-aircraft guns. Over the task force, scout planes arc into the clouds, heading north and west. Intelligence reports suggest a massive Japanese carrier strike force, Kido Butai, is approaching Midway Atoll. 4 carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, the same fleet that had destroyed Pearl Harbor just 6 months earlier. Now, the Yorktown, raised from the dead, is steaming out to meet them in the ship's ready room. Pilots gather around chalkboards scrawled with sketches of Japanese carriers and tactics. Lieutenant Commander Wade McCluskey, leading dive bomber squadrons from the Enterprise, walks in to brief them. "Gentlemen," he says, "this is it. Midway's our chance to break their spine." Back on deck, night falls. The Yorktown's deck crews guide planes below using red lanterns to preserve night vision. The ship creaks and groans as she pushes through the waves. Inside her hull, water drips from the patch seams, reminders of how fragile she still is. Commander Tibbett, now aboard only as an observer, walks through the lower decks. He runs his hand over a newly welded bulkhead, still warm to the touch. "Don't you give up now, girl," he whispers. Above him, in the dark sky, carrier pilots stare out over the black Pacific. knowing the enemy is somewhere beyond the horizon, maybe already moving toward them. At 2,300 hours, a coded message arrives from Midway Station. Enemy fleet sighted. Estimated approach within 24 hours. The tension on board tightens like a drawn wire. Men check their weapons, test communications, and tie Lucky Charms to their belts. The Yorktown's chaplain holds a quiet service in the mess hall. The hymn echoes through the steel corridors, mingling with the rhythmic hum of the engines. By midnight, the sea is calm, unnaturally calm. The Yorktown cuts silently through the water, her patched plates shimmering faintly under the moon. No one sleeps. Every man aboard knows what's coming. When dawn breaks, they'll face the might of Japan's first air fleet, and the fate of the Pacific will hang in the balance. June 4th, 1942. Midway Atoll, Pacific Ocean. Dawn breaks over a sea of glass. The Yorktown moves with her task force, 30 knots northeast of Midway. The air hums with tension, and the low, constant roar of aircraft engines warming up on her deck. At 0530 hours, a radio crackles to life in the Combat Information Center. Enemy carriers sighted, bearing 320 degrees. Distance 180 miles. Captain Buckmaster and Admiral Frank Jack Fletcher, aboard the Yorktown, lock eyes. The moment has come. Launch strike group, Fletcher orders. Let's finish this. The deck becomes a whirlwind. Yellow shirt handlers wave signal flags as dauntless dive bombers and Devastator torpedo planes roar forward one after another. Their engines scream, wings catching the wind, wheels lifting from the deck. One by one, they vanish into the morning haze, climbing toward destiny. On the bridge, Fletcher watches them go. He knows every man in those planes carries the weight of the Pacific on his shoulders. Below decks, damage control teams stand ready. The Yorktown's patched bulkheads and jury-rig systems tested now under combat conditions for the first time. At 1,000 hours, the radio explodes with chatter. Enemy attack inbound. Bearing 340. Altitude 15,000. All hands to battle stations. Klaxons blare. The ship's corridors flash red. Sailors sprint to their posts, slamming hatches, loading ammunition, manning 5-inch guns and 20mm Oerlikons. Over the horizon, tiny specks appear, dozens of Japanese Aichi D-3 Aval dive bombers, escorted by nimble Zero fighters. The first bombs fall like thunder. The sky splits open as explosions rip across the Yorktown's deck. Anti-aircraft gunners fire blindly into the smoke, tracers streaking upward. The carrier rolls with the impact, steel shrieking in protest. A direct hit tears through the forward elevator. Flames erupt, swallowing the hangar deck. Men rush with hoses and extinguishers, choking in the smoke. Get those valves shut. Seal off Section 3. Damage Control Officer Lieutenant Commander McGuire, the same man who'd spent sleepless nights patching the ship at Pearl, grabs a wrench and dives into the chaos. Steam hisses from ruptured pipes, water flooding compartments. Pump line 3 offline, someone yells. Reroute to auxiliary. McGuire shouts back. On the bridge, Buckmaster grips the railing as another explosion rocks the ship. Shrapnel slices through the air, tearing into radar equipment. For a moment, the Yorktown seems to die. Her power flickers, her engines stall, her decks engulfed in fire. Then, miraculously, the lights return. She's still alive, a sailor cries out. Fire crews swarm the burning sections. They fight with everything they have: seawater, CO2, extinguishers, even their bare hands. The inferno roars, but slowly, painfully, it begins to die. By 1240 hours, the smoke begins to thin. The fires are contained. Damage control reports come in. Boiler room holding. Hull integrity stable. Flight deck operational, partially. The men cheer weakly. The Yorktown, the ship that should have been scrap metal, is still in the fight. But above them, Japanese reconnaissance planes circle like vultures. At 1,400 hours, radar picks up second wave, Another squadron of dive bombers from Hiryu. Here they come again. The gunners are ready this time. Shells fill the sky, bursting into clouds of black flak. The incoming planes twist and dive, engines howling. 2 bombs at home. One crashes through the flight deck, detonating deep inside the ship. The other smashes near the port side, blowing men overboard. The Yorktown shudders violently. Steam erupts from below as the boiler rooms flood. Maguire staggers through knee-deep water, shouting over the roar. Seal it off. Get the pumps running. Engines down, comes the call from engineering. For the second time that day, the carrier goes dead in the water. Smoke pours from her funnels. On the horizon, American dive bombers, returning from their own attack runs, spot the Japanese carriers. Within minutes, 3 of them, Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu, are burning wrecks. But the Hiryu is still alive, and she has eyes on the Yorktown. By late afternoon, another formation of enemy bombers closes in. The Yorktown's anti-aircraft batteries roar once more, but there are too many. A torpedo slams into her starboard side. Then another. The ship lurches. Water floods through ruptured bulkheads. Lights flicker out. Abandoned ship. Captain Buckmaster orders. The call spreads through the decks like fire. Men scramble topside, leaping into the oil-slicked sea as the great carrier begins to list. The once proud ship, raised from the dead, reforged by sweat and courage, now groans as the ocean claims her again. By 1600 hours, the Yorktown lies crippled, drifting, but she has done her part. Her aircraft helped destroy the enemy's carriers. The tide of the Pacific War has turned. Commander Tibbet, watching from a destroyer nearby, lowers his head. The Yorktown had been given 72 more hours of life, and, in that borrowed time, she helped change the course of history. He whispers, "You did it, old girl. You did it." The Pacific glitters around her as the sun sets, a sea stained with oil, fire, and victory. June 6, 1942. 0900 hours. Pacific Ocean, north of Midway. The USS Yorktown drifts silently across the sea, her once proud hull scarred and twisted, her decks empty. Smoke still curls from open wounds in her steel skin. The battle is over, but the ocean refuses to forget. Destroyers Hammond and Balch circle nearby, their decks crowded with oil-soaked sailors, the survivors. They watch their ship in silence. The soft slap of waves against the hull, the only sound on the bridge of the Hammond. Commander Arnold True lowers his binoculars. "She's still afloat," he says quietly. "Damn stubborn ship." Captain Buckmaster, exhausted and bandaged, nods. "She always was. The Yorktown shouldn't have survived the night. 2 torpedoes, 2 bombs, power lost, bulkheads blown open, yet she still refuses to sink." The engineers' quick patchwork repairs, made in the desperate 72-hour race at Pearl Harbor, are somehow still holding. But she's dying slowly. Every hour, seawater creeps higher through her decks, claiming her inch by inch. A T-1100 hours. Salvage crews board her, hoping to tow her back. Commander Clarence Tibbet, the man who led her miraculous repair, climbs the gangway one last time. The air smells of fuel and salt. The deck is eerily quiet, the chaos of battle replaced by the whisper of the wind that he walks through the hangar bay, past twisted steel and half-burned planes. The bulkheads are blackened, the once white walls coated in soot. He reaches out and touches the patched section of deck where welders had worked nonstop 3 days and nights back in Pearl Harbor. The metal is warm under the sun. "You did your job," he murmurs. But the sea isn't finished with her YET, the T-1330 hours. Sonar operators aboard the destroyers pick up a chilling signal. Torpedoes inbound. Submarine contact. Bearing 270. A Japanese submarine, I-168, has slipped through the destroyer screen. Moments later, torpedoes slice through the water toward the crippled carrier and her escort. One slams into the Hammond, breaking her in 2. Another hits the Yorktown. The explosion rips through her side, sending columns of water and debris skyward. Men on nearby ships are thrown to the deck by the blast. Tibbet is knocked off his feet, clutching a railing as the ship groans beneath him. He can hear the sickening crack of steel as the hull splits deeper. "Abandoned ship! All hands off!" a voice shouts. Sailors leap into the churning sea as the Yorktown begins to list sharply to port. Water floods her hangar deck, sweeping through the open hatches. Tibbet pauses at the edge of the deck, looking back one final time. The stars and stripes still ripple weakly from her mast, framed against the blazing sky. He salutes. Then he jumps. By dusk, the destroyers have pulled the survivors from the oil-slicked water. They watch in silence as the Yorktown, their home, their miracle, drifts farther away, her bow rising and falling with the slow rhythm of the dying. For the rest of the night, she lingers, a ghost on the horizon. At 0700 hours on June 7th, she finally rolls onto her port side. The water rushes through her open wounds. Her stern lifts skyward, her name visible one last time beneath the waves of the Pacific. Then, with a groan that echoes for miles, the USS Yorktown slides beneath the surface. Bubbles burst and fade. The sea closes over her, calm once more. The men watch from the decks of the rescue ships. No one speaks. Captain Buckmaster removes his cap. "She gave everything she had," he says softly. And she had. The Yorktown's 72-hour resurrection had bought the U.S. Navy a fighting chance. And at Midway, that chance became victory. Her planes helped sink 3 Japanese carriers, crippling the once invincible Kido Butai. Historians would later call it the turning point of the Pacific War. But for the men who were there, it was simpler than that. They would always remember the sound of hammers in Pearl Harbor, the sparks raining down on her deck, the smell of oil and steel, and the miracle of a ship that refused to die. Beneath the waves, the Yorktown rests in silence, her scars sealed by the deep, her spirit carried on by every carrier that came after her. The engineers who raised her did more than repair a ship. They gave hope to a navy and turned the tide of a world at war.